Welcome to the Motorhome Matt podcast. I'm Keith Gooden.
And I'm Motorhome Matt.
We're here every week to update you on audio and video about what you need and want to know about motorhomes, hiring them, buying them, selling them and fixing them.
Wow.
There you go.
Hopefully some of it's useful.
If you're a new listener or a watcher, where have you been for the last 18 months? We've been here waiting for you to turn up.
Sitting here quietly in the corner.
We have, and if you were with us from the start, well done, you're a trendsetter.
You know what, we've got people who've listened to every episode. It's amazing. Thank you.
I should hope so. Thank you very much. Okay, let's get on with it. Let's delve into the news, shall we, today? The Bath and West show, you're there, aren't you?
The Royal Bath and West show. We will be there, yes. We are supplying the organisers with motorhomes from our hire fleet to live in during the show. And the shop team will be there as well. So thatleisureshop.com are taking a stand, and we will have a whole load of product on display for sale. So lovely chairs, tables, kayaks, paddle boards, loads of camping accessories. So if you're going to the show, it's at the Shepton Mallet Showground.
Will some of your hire team be there?
Yes, they will. Yeah, some of them will be there with a couple of motorhomes for hire, just as a sample of what you could go on holiday in this summer or next year. We're starting to take bookings for next year now as well. So go along to the show. It's fantastic. 3-day show, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Doesn't run on the Sunday because all the farmers are busy milking, apparently. So it's a 3-day show.
It'll be great. And don't forget, on the Friday afternoon as you're travelling down, all the farmers like to take their tractors out for about 4 p.m. in the afternoon.
When you see a farmer cutting the hedges, you know he's bored. Got nothing else to do.
And also, not just the Bath and West show where you've got some of your fleet, you're in show business now with the new series of The Outlaws, which has been very popular.
It has been, yeah. Stephen Merchant. I loved it. Some people hated it, I think it's fair to say, but I really enjoyed series 1 and 2. And yes, once again, they're filming in Bristol, and we've got a number of motorhomes being supplied to the crew and the cast as green rooms, so a place they can sit and rest and read the script, learn their lines, and that's happening all across the city, and a bit wider field as well. So it's interesting to see where they're filming this year. It's going to be good.
Stephen Merchant, was he 6'7", 6'8"?
At least, yeah.
Have you got a special big-doored motorhome for him?
It's the very tall one. Yeah, I can tell you that he wheezed in the toilet while standing in the shower.
Stephen, we know that's not true. The Motorhome Matt podcast is brought to you with thatleisureshop.com. Let's get into the main bit of the podcast. Breakdown, recovery, letdowns, and this is a big subject for Motorhome Matt.
It's been very close to home this last week. If you've been following us on any social channel, you would have seen me looking frightened in the dark as I sat in a broken down car and waited for the RAC to come out and rescue me. I was in a little Alfa Romeo, there's a clue, which unfortunately did break down. And 15 and a half hours later, a man in bright orange did arrive.
How many hours later?
15 and a half.
15 and a half hours?
Not a great experience, I have to say. In fact, it was pretty appalling. Sat on the side of the road. Not all night, I have to say. In the end, I'll tell you what happened. After about 6 hours, I called the police on the advice of the RAC. I was on a busy A road, 60-mile-hour limit. It's very fast on the Mendip, so very, very dark. And my alternator had failed, so the battery had run flat. So I'd lost all lights on the car. I had no hazard lights. It was pitch black, very cold. And I said to the RAC, I actually feel frightened sat here because someone is going to come round the bend behind me and not see me and rear end me. There was nowhere I could retreat to, short of climbing through a hedge and into a field. I mean, that just really wasn't practical. So I was on the advice of the RAC. I was told, call 999. I was like, really? 999? They said, no, if you feel vulnerable, you should. So I was like, well, okay. And I felt a fraud to do it. So I did. And I said to the telephone operator, look, tell me to hang up if this is inappropriate. I feel fake doing this. And they were, bless them, whoever took the call was superb. They said, no, Matt, it's fine. You've done the right thing. We will send a patrol to you. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, blue lights behind me. Two guys got out and said, no, you've absolutely done the right thing. You are in a dangerous position. We would consider that your life could be at risk. So with their help, we closed the road. We pushed the car across the carriageway that was opposite and into a lay-by. And then they took me home in the back of their police van. That was an experience.
Did they indeed? I've seen people like you on the television on Channel 5.
I took a picture. I wasn't actually in the back, in the cage.
No.
There's a seat for a police officer to sit, and I was there. And they very kindly dropped me. It was only 45 minutes to get home. They took me home. It's about 1 a.m. by this point. And I then spoke to the RAC and said, look, I'm no longer with the car. They'd appointed a contractor and said, well, they will ring you in the next 3 hours to pick the car up. Can you get back to it? I said, yeah, I've got another car here. I can get back to it. Do that. And the contractor didn't call me until 7:15. So I spent the night barely sleeping. It was about 2 before I got to sleep, and just, the other thing when you think the phone's going to ring any second. So I really didn't sleep well. Drove back to the car, and by this point I was told that a patrolman was going to attend it. And he duly did, and he did relay us back to the office where we could get the car fixed.
Now, we do have to say that the breakdown rescue services do prioritise certain customers. For instance, people with children, women on their own. So you might just have been a bit unlucky that night.
I think so, yeah. Someone did comment that it was an Alfa Romeo. You should have called them before you set off.
Yes, we have some comments here. You should have called the RAC before you set off. In the RAC's defence, they had 27 other Alfa Romeos to deal with that night.
That could be true.
Jay got in touch with us. He's a patrolman for a rescue service. He says no one shares their good experiences. Most of our time is taken up by changing headlight bulbs at 3 p.m. The filter for breakdown, he says, is flawed.
Yeah, it's a valid point, isn't it? I guess that could be true. I mean, I have to say, the RAC have since rung me. In fact, just minutes before we started recording this, a lovely lady called Emily from the RAC customer complaints team had rung me, and she acknowledged that it was absolutely below par, that the service was poor, in fact, beyond poor. And she was full of apologies for the service they'd given me. In fact, they have offered me some financial compensation as well. We had, prior to this phone call, I should point out, asked them to comment, because we approached all of the breakdown services for comment on this. And so they did know that we have a podcast, and they had, I believe, seen some of the content on social media. They offered me £100 compensation, which is over half my membership fee, and an apology. And to be honest, I'm happy with that. I accepted it, and I've this morning emailed them my bank details, so we'll see when that gets paid. But they did decline to give any comment from their press team whatsoever, which I think is a real shame.
And did you get any responses from anybody else?
We had a great response from the AA.
Yeah, I've got that here. They say we attend an average of 10,000 breakdowns per day. We do get hundreds more pothole-related breakdowns following rain, as often drivers can't spot the potholes underneath the puddles. The pothole fills up with water. We believe the number of breakdowns is likely to increase, say the AA, as the average age of car on the road has increased due to the cost of living crisis, and also people waiting for electric vehicles to turn up. So they're sort of stringing out the ownership of the vehicle that they intend to trade in. They also say that many of the breakdowns we attend are caused by problems which could be solved with routine maintenance. We do, though, fix more than 80% of problems at the roadside, which is what customers want.
Yeah, well, that's fair, isn't it? Thank you, the AA. We appreciate you, Tony. For Anne Edmund, who I messaged, who is, of course, the president of the AA, and he referred it to their PR team, and they very kindly came back with these comments. We did ask Green Flag to comment as well. They declined and said they were in a closed period, whatever that means. I have no idea.
Your guess is as good as mine. The AA
No
did
idea.
actually give us quite a lot of comment, including when you asked what's the biggest challenge your organisation is facing at this time, because I should imagine their challenges at the AA are common to the other breakdown services. They say there are skill shortages across the motoring industry, which does have a knock-on effect on patrol recruitment. They're saying they're working with colleges in our busiest workload areas on a project that could see newly qualified college leavers step into mentored entry-level patrol roles. So they're looking to recruit people out of college, younger generation, to help to fill their staffing issues. But we do have to say that thanks for the response to the AA, nonetheless, they should have foreseen whether they have got enough staff or not.
Yeah, it was interesting. Since this episode, I have stopped and spoken to a number of RAC patrolmen who I've bumped into. I saw one parked in a lay-by and I pulled in and said, would you speak to me? He reckoned that 25% of their workforce had left. I don't know if that's true, but that was his comment. And another patrolman that was recovering a car to a local garage, I asked the customer, how long have you waited? 6.5 hours. He said, but it was fine. The car was at home. I was working from home. So he was not unhappy with that. I still thought that was a long time to get the car recovered. The patrolman said he could earn more working in a garage than he could doing a patrolman job, where his life is at risk. You know, he's on the side of a smart motorway or, you know, on a busy road, and, you know, he could get run over. No chance of that in a garage, is there?
Yeah, I did mention the fact that they do have priority lists when you call in. For instance, if you're a woman on your own, or you have children in the car, or perhaps you're disabled. But I would have thought you would have been fairly high up because, as you said when we started this conversation, that you were on an unlit country road, even though it was an A road, wasn't it?
It was an A road,
yeah. An unlit A road. And per capita, the amount of accidents on country roads compared to urban roads is much higher.
Yes.
So, yeah, even though there are fewer accidents per capita, if you compare them with the amount of people that use them, then actually the risk on country roads is a lot higher. So I would have thought that would have put you up the list a bit.
It did. And Emily acknowledged that from the customer complaints team. She said, yeah, we noted that you were in a vulnerable position and you were a priority call, and we didn't do anything about that. So they did acknowledge that.
Yeah, we've also asked Caravan Guard, you might recall from a few podcasts ago, the insurance company, what their biggest challenge their organisation is facing at this time in regard to this. And they've said, we have heard stories of people who have been sent the wrong recovery vehicle for the size of their camper van or large motorhome. But otherwise, they don't see much of a problem with it.
No. And the membership I've got, the membership level I have with the RAC is called RAC Arrival. So it's a very specific product designed and aimed at motorhome caravan owners. So lots of motorhomes are over 7 metres, which I think is the kind of length cap that the AA will recover. But the RAC, they raised that limit. As far as I know, it's unlimited. I know once, I've spoken about it before, I was in a 10-metre long American motorhome, and the RAC did recover that back to Bristol from Lincolnshire. So it was a long relay through the night, and it's specialist equipment. And I know that the RAC will send a contractor out to recover you in a motorhome that's long, over the 7 metres, as part of this cover. So it probably cost me a little bit more, but that recovery with the American RV would have cost them probably over £2,000 to get me from all the way in Lincolnshire back home and get that recovery vehicle back north.
We have had a listener, a viewer to the podcast, get in touch with us with something very interesting. She worked in a call centre for one of these companies.
I actually used to work for a large breakdown company, and I started off in the services. So anybody who had broken down would ring in and, you know, we'd help them out. But then I was very quickly moved to the sales department to sell new policies, upgrade policies, add things on and stuff, because there was such a high turnover of customers because the service was so poor. And I think it did come across like it was more about the money coming in. An example of that is we used to actually take the phone calls, and I believe that they were paid to take the phone calls by children in need, and we were actually told, look, we need people, and we were actually offered double time to go and take the calls for the children in need donations rather than sort of servicing our own customers. it wasn't the most enjoyable place to work, I got to say, but I just thought I'd sort of chip in and give my own experience, because I've been on the end of the phone when we've had people calling in and complaining a lot of times. I don't work there now, and I won't go back to working there personally.
Now, we haven't asked the rescue service in question about those comments, but we will put it to them. But Matt, it's not unreasonable if you've got a call centre to generate extra revenue by renting out some of your operatives to take calls for a customer. But she says that actually the rescue service customers were compromised.
Yeah, that's not good listening, is it? That's not good at all. Thank you for the message. We appreciate it. And obviously, we don't have any evidence to back this up, just this caller's comments. If you're that breakdown service and you want to comment, we would welcome it, obviously. But yeah, that's not good, is it? Not good listening at all.
Now, let's talk about the company that Matt was signed up to, the RAC. They say they're 60 minutes to help in the contract. What if they don't do this? What rights do us as consumers have?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the breakdown services from our research are all regulated by the Financial Ombudsman, and I guess it's because they're selling an insurance policy. But what seems to be regulated is the way they conduct themselves in terms of a complaint, your renewal, payment of that renewal. So if your policy auto renews without your permission, and you can see everything that's regulated on the FCA, Financial Ombudsman's website. What doesn't appear to be regulated by them is the service level and response time. So my experience, 50.5 hours, generated a complaint, and their response and how they deal with that complaint is what's regulated. And I have to say that arguably they've been brilliant. So their response time to me has been really quick. So I broke down a week ago, and I've had a financial compensation offer today, which I accepted and I'm very happy with, as I say. So, that bit they're on probably because it's regulated. And if they breach that, then you have some recourse with the Ombudsman. But it would seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the actual service that I'm paying for isn't regulated by any body.
Not even the Consumer Acts?
Seemingly not. I don't know. Maybe it is. And if you're listening, if you're at a breakdown service, please would you comment, because we would love to know. I would add though, Keith, when we were in Harrogate, do you remember we talked about the fact we put a motorhome outside the entrance to the Motorhome show? That
one broke down as well, didn't it?
Yeah, don't travel with me. The battery failed on it. It wouldn't start. Well, it was less than an hour pretty much, and it was fixed.
But that's the thing, isn't it? We're talking about a patchy service. I mean, your 15.5 hour wait does seem pretty unreasonable, and the breakdown company has put their hands up to that one. But
yeah.
And now you're saying when you're up in Harrogate, it was just an hour, which
Well, within 20 minutes, a chap was on the phone, Mark, I remember. He was there within 15 minutes. He then went off and bought us a new battery. It was a very reasonably priced starter battery. We sell them in the shop, and I think it was £160 or something, which is not a lot more than you can buy one for from a motor factor shop. And it was brilliant. In fact, the RAC asked us who was the patrolman, what was the reg, because they wanted to congratulate him, and they shared our social posts on that occasion. Oddly, not this one.
Yeah, but it shows the difficulties that these companies do have. It depends where you break down and what the staffing is like on the night, and it's a bit of a lottery. And to be honest with you, when you're dealing with a large company such as that, these things are going to happen occasionally.
Yeah, of course they are. It's people, isn't it? And it depends what happens on the night. And, I was told there'd been a very busy night. I mean, 10,000 calls a day the AA deal with. That's a lot.
That's a huge amount. And when you think many of them, as they said there with the AA, when I was reading out those responses to our press inquiries, they were saying a lot of them can be solved just by basic maintenance.
Yeah.
Or, check your tyres, run your fingers in the tread of the tyre and you feel those little dimples in the tread. Those are the markers. And if when you run your finger through the tread and you come across a marker, it's level with the rest of the wheel, you need to change your tyre.
Yeah,
and it's these levels of basic maintenance that this breakdown company, the AA, say are the cause of most of their call-outs.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So we have to share some responsibility. And you were driving an Italian car.
Yeah, but oddly, it'd been repaired. It'd been to London to a specialist to have the electric roof repaired and an MOT. The thing that went wrong was nothing to do with the repairs. And someone did comment, I'd be on the phone to the garage that fixed it. Well, this was totally unrelated. The alternator happened to fail. It's an old car.
Did it rain, by the way, while you were waiting? It did. Well, you were lucky after 15 and a half hours there wasn't just a puddle of rust.
Yeah, it's a great little car. One day it'll be worth some money.
You're not a real petrol head unless you've owned an Alpha.
No, I can tell I own two.
Well, let's get back and get serious about this. Should the levels of customer services from these breakdown companies be regulated? As you say, financial services, the part of the contract is regulated. But the level of customer care doesn't appear to be regulated. There's clearly small print in the contract which says if they don't get to you, you've got little recourse apart from to complain to their customer service. Should we take a step up? Should there be a proper regulatory body such as an Ofcom or an Ofwat who do have statutory powers to fine these companies if they're not meeting basic levels of service?
But what would the impact of that be? I mean, for the RAC, if they are short-staffed, we don't know that they are. I suspect that might be one of the factors that was at play here in our region, hence this long call-out time. But that might force them to get creative, like the AA evidently are with their university scheme. Oh, it's a great idea, but it would just mean the premiums go up, surely. If they've got to employ more people or pay staff more to keep them, if it's true that patrolmen are thinking, you know what, I can go and earn the same or more working in a garage. I don't want to do this patrol job anymore. It's a tough job, isn't it? It's a tough gig. Then surely the premiums will go up. Won't that be a side effect of regulation?
It would be. Premiums probably would go up, but the level of service would go up. What would you rather have? Something you can depend on and pay a bit more for it, or something which provides the service that you had on that occasion? We have to balance that by saying on another occasion they were superb. But on that occasion, would you have spent an extra £100 a year knowing that you could get a premium service?
Yeah, maybe I would. I would need to think about that. Yeah. I mean, the other option for me is I don't have any breakdown cover and I just call out a recovery company like the RAC were going to do with me. They didn't in the end. And we have friends who own one. And I could have called them and they would have brought the car to the garage, which is where it is now, waiting repair. And that would probably have cost me less than my annual premium, but I would pay that every time.
But that's what people are afraid of, because these breakdown services were set up originally in response to people many years ago who were recovering vehicles and overcharging. So again, there's that balance there, isn't there? There are these recovery services. They promote themselves as experts. Usually their customer service is pretty good when you're in trouble. They do prioritise vulnerable customers, but they take away that doubt of saying to somebody, can you come and tell me? And they say, yeah, that'd be £600. Yeah,
that's the risk, isn't it? I'd love to know what your experience has been if you're listening or watching this. What's your breakdown experience been in this country and in Europe as well? I mean, that's a whole nother layer of concern for me. But as the owner of a motorhome hire business, at the moment, we're doing very, very little European destination hire. So if you want to hire and go to France, generally we would say no. We're reconsidering that at the moment. But the only reason we're doing that is because of our concern about breakdown response times and the ability to get a family recovered to another motorhome, to a hotel, or even back home. And that worries me.
Okay, let's wrap this up now with some advice from you, Matt. Preparing for a breakdown. I've said most, according to the AA, most of their call-outs are due to things that actually are just normal, regular maintenance that you should be doing, like tyres and oils and stuff like that. Running out of fuel is another one, which incidentally, there's a change to the highway code coming. If you run out of fuel, you could be liable for £1,000 fine in future.
Really? From who?
Yes, from the police. So if you're on the motorway and you're low on fuel, and there's a rumour that coming in the next highway code update that if you run out of fuel and it's avoidable, £1,000 fine. And frankly, I agree with that one. Well, it's different if you've got a hole in the petrol tank. We're talking about people who just didn't fill up.
Right. Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. one to watch. What happens if the service station's got no fuel?
Well, precisely. I mean, clearly somebody has to make a considered decision about it. But if there's a petrol station 2 miles down the road and you've driven past it and run out of fuel because you don't have a method of payment, then clearly that causes a lot of issues, not just for breakdown services but other road users as well.
I know if you run out of fuel, the RAC will make a charge before they even turn up.
Yeah,
because they have to take your old fuel away. If you miss fuel, sorry. So if you put diesel in a petrol car, they will. That's different, I know.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah,
they will charge you. I think it's £250 before they even start.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Another quick one before we move on this. I was driving up to the Belfry last weekend and up the M5 around Cheltenham area, and we must have just got past this accident literally as it happened. A very large lorry with that is it Harris fencing or whatever, that metal fencing?
Harris, yeah.
Is it Harris fencing? Had a flatbed with that piled up onto it. Clearly it had shifted, and the lorry had gone off the motorway onto the hard shoulder, hit some trees which were overhanging because it was a tall load, and lost one of their rear wheels and come to a stop. And the first thing that I saw as I went past was some debris in the road, which slowed people down and people coming around it, and this poor lorry and the people getting out of the lorry. But also the RAC van was coming up to help, even though this was clearly not probably not one of their customers. But he was there, or she was there, pulling over to help in the event of an accident. So I must say that.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Well, they've got equipment to do it, haven't they? Lights and a bright van, and people see that orange van or the yellow AA van, whichever breakdown recovery, and you're alerted to it, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of your tips then for preparing for a possible breakdown. So you're setting out on your journey, you're in your motorhome, you're in your caravan or whatever. What should we be doing? What should we be checking? What are the useful little widgets that you flog that could perhaps take advantage of?
Well, some of them we do flog, that's true. On that particular incident when I broke down, I didn't have any of this stuff, it's worth saying. I'd gone to London on the train and brought an empty car back, but a high-vis would have been very much appreciated. I'd recommend having those in the car. That's, of course, a requirement on the continent. It's not here, a very sensible addition to have. I got really cold, so blanket, a silver blanket or just a blanket, and then some outer garments. It was amazing how cold and windy it got. I was in a T-shirt and a kind of sports jacket, a work jacket, and it, outside when I was with the police, I was shivering. So gloves, hat, and maybe a better coat or jumper.
And this is the beginning of May we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it did get. I was on the Mendip, so it was pretty exposed. We sell a V16 beacon, so we've talked before about the warning triangle. My Alpha didn't have a warning triangle. I did look in the boot for one. It doesn't. It does now. In fact, it has one of these beacons. So in Spain, the warning triangle is going to be discontinued, and these little orange beacons are replacing them. They're a legal alternative now to a warning triangle. Lots of reports of people being injured or worse putting out the warning triangle, let alone people not seeing it. And so these beacons, you don't have to get out of the car. You just lean out. In a car, this would work. You place it on the roof and it turns on. There's a magnetic switch and it starts. It's a white torch or a flashing orange beacon. The V16 bit means they can be seen from a kilometre away. They are incredibly bright. I'm giving them to all the family that drive and asking them to put one in the boot or the glove box. On a motorhome, of course, it's plastic, so there's nowhere to stick it, that would take the magnet, but just put it on the floor behind. That would have been a really, really good investment, 20 odd quid in the shop. We've had a load delivered from Spain.
And you mentioned them, and we've discussed this in a past podcast, but if you have a breakdown and it's battery related or electrical related, that you can't put your hazards on. So these little widgets, these are a fantastic idea.
Well, that was my problem. My hazard lights were just going click, click, slower and dimmer, and eventually they stopped working altogether. And that's where a beacon would have been ideal. And equally, my phone was going flat I kept phoning the RAC. I was in a poor network connection, so the little iPhone's working flat out trying to keep a connection. So a phone charger would have been really useful. I was fortunate I had my MacBook with me, so I could plug the phone into that to keep it charged. But a little portable power pack, we sell a Maypole one. They will actually jumpstart a car. They're that clever. That would be really useful. And some really obvious stuff like a bottle of water, something to drink, and maybe a bar of chocolate or a flapjack or something, just to keep sugar levels up.
Yeah, because, absolutely. You were saying you want to keep your sugar levels up because you've got to concentrate on what's happening around you, even though you're not going anywhere. And remember, if your hazards have gone and you're sitting there on an A road like Matt was, and you can't have your hazards on, and it's dangerous to place the warning triangle because you've tried and people are coming up that road at 60 miles an hour. Remember, on country roads, you don't have a hard shoulder and there's usually stinging nettles on both sides. So if you can't make yourself obvious, the people coming down the road don't know that you've broken down. They're doing 60 miles an hour. They're doing everything right, and then a tragedy happens.
Yeah, that's right. And on this particular road, I know there are people travelling at 3 figures, 100 plus.
Well, they shouldn't be, should they?
No, I saw them. It's just incredulous. There's often accidents on this particular road where youngsters are driving at a hell of a speed and they get it wrong. And that's the thing, is what do you do when you break down is, well, get out of the car if you can. I couldn't, as you say, there was just hedgerows and just, big drop into a field. There wasn't really anywhere for me to go. Yeah.
There's a ditch for drainage by the side of the road.
There was on this particular road. And it was cold as well. And I thought, no, I want to stay warm. I took the decision to stay in the car.
Which probably wasn't the best advice.
No, probably not.
But...
And it was when the hazards went completely that I rang the RAC and said, look, it's been nearly 6 hours. I need an update. And that's when I called 999.
Now imagine if you were a woman on your own. You had kids in the back. And now, before we started recording this, Matt mentioned that, well, people just lie. They just ring up and say, I'm pregnant, or, my wife is having a heart attack, or the kids, I need
kids
medication.
In the car. Yeah.
Don't lie. Because if everybody lies, the people who really need help aren't going to get the help, and it could be you.
That's true. Yeah. Had I lied, would I have received a quicker response? Maybe.
Probably, but don't do it.
No,
really, don't do it. I mean, what if you lie and somebody is killed or abducted, or a child runs into the road and is severely injured? You do care about that. Everybody cares about that.
Of course, yeah. And I was in a vulnerable situation, and still, that was a level of service I got. So maybe lying wouldn't have made any difference in my circumstance. But I would say if you can get out of the car and get to safety, then you should. This brings back Edmund King's comments in the conversation I had with him, the chap who's president of the AA, about smart motorways. Yeah, and I was sat there thinking, gosh, if this was on a smart motorway, I would rely on the red X turning on and someone acknowledging it and getting out the carriageway. And that's even faster road. You
would, but you do have the option of getting over the barrier and at least saving your life. And we mentioned this before.
Provided there is one. I mean, the M4 has just become a big smart motorway going past Reading, and there are big lengths of it where, yes, there's a barrier, and it's a foot, 18 inches behind the barrier, and there's a big wall. So you're not really protected, are you, behind that barrier? We were driving up there the other day to Campervan Campouts, and we were discussing it as we were driving, saying, look how little space there is to find safety. A car hitting that or a lorry hitting that, elements of that vehicle are going to bounce over into that void. And
I'll tell you a story, a tragic story, actually. A friend of mine, a guy called Gus Dudgeon, who's a record producer, he was travelling back from London to the Reading area with his wife after a party, must be said, over the limit, which you shouldn't be, and came off the road in a convertible, so it's soft top, and went over the barrier, turned over, and ended up in a sort of, not a ditch, but a culvert, which carried water away, which happened to be full. They both drowned. So, you can't guard against every accident, but when you're on the motorway, get over that fence. Doesn't matter about the car. It just matters about you and the family.
No, and the reason that wall was there is because there was a huge drop. Because we looked at it and thought, why is the wall there? That's ridiculous. Well, it was just the way the landscape was, where they'd extended the motorway up to the edge. But it just made me think, gosh, there's no space to actually hide away here. And, those refuge points are a long way apart, aren't they, on the smart motorways?
And also coming into summer now and heading up towards the longest day as we record this, don't be fooled by the fact that it's brighter for later. Accidents can still happen. You're still at risk even though it's not dark. So your list there, that's a good list. Have high vis. Now, I went to France. I've been talking about it for ages.
Did you?
For a few days. I did. And they insist on a little kit that you've got to bring with you. And it is, a spare bulb kit, which you can buy for a few pounds. High vis for every passenger in the car. So if you've got a 5-seater, 5 high vises.
Everyone that can walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the triangle you talked about. First aid kit, just in case you've had a bump and somebody needs a plaster or some painkillers. But also, interestingly, and I think this would be good for over here, a little bit off subject, a portable alcohol testing kit. See if you're over the limit.
Yeah, but that's not a legal requirement anymore.
No.
It was a law introduced by the French, promptly ignored, and now.
Yeah, but I bought them and I thought this is a good idea. Because if you're at a party or whatever, just take it over the limit. I know it's a little bit off subject, but I thought that was a good idea.
They are a good idea, but that's a contentious one. We'd all be self-regulating our alcohol intake, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Basically, if you're driving, don't drink. Simple.
It's as simple as that. And I never do. So Paul Gleave is in Wales. He says, Matt, this is truly shocking, your experience. I can't understand how it could possibly take that long to get to you. I insure my van with Comfort Insurance and opt into the recovery service offered by them. Had to use them 3 times for breakdowns, and every time the AA have been with me within the hour. Doesn't specify that it will be the AA in the insurance documents, but they must be the preferred provider. Can't fault their service, always been excellent. I must quickly say, just to balance that, I was thrown out the AA. I had a Skoda Superb, and when the headlights go on the old versions of that, you had to take out half the air conditioning ducting. So I had to call them every time. After 3 times, they sent me a letter saying, we really don't want you to be a member of this organisation anymore. So thanks for your comments there.
It's always struck me as an odd name for a car, a Skoda Superb.
Very good car. A very good car.
Heated windscreens. Keep your hands warm when you're pushing it.
It's the Motorhome Matt podcast with me, Keith Gooden, and Motorhome Matt. You've been getting in touch on this subject. Mick Collier is in Barnstable. Hi, Matt. Regarding your troubles, which breakdown service would you advise, especially as I'm disabled and a blue badge holder? I mentioned this briefly earlier on, but what's your advice? I suppose he's asking you which one to sign up to, and that's not really our thing. We shouldn't really be doing that, should we?
No, and also, I suppose... I mean, you're a blue badge holder, Keith.
I am indeed, yeah.
But does that have any bearing for you on a breakdown service?
I'm a blue badge holder because I was born with 2 club feet due to my mum taking a drug called thalidomide, which affects how fast and how far I can walk. And I have a blue badge for that. However, if I broke down, I wouldn't necessarily say I was disabled because I'll be sitting in my car waiting for the breakdown service to arrive. So I think there's light and shade here. Just because you have a blue badge doesn't mean to say that your disability precludes you from waiting in a queue.
No, and I guess it depends what the disability is and the reason for the blue badge.
Absolutely. I mean, people might need to take medicines, for instance, at specific times, and their medicines are at home and they're stuck on a road.
Yeah.
It might be that you have somebody with, bladder or bowel problems, which are difficult problems and issues, and have mitigations which need to be seen to every few hours. So there's lots of different reasons, but for me as a blue badge holder, it's to do with mobility, and actually in this case, in the case that the situation you were in, it wouldn't have affected me.
No, and I think it depends what vehicle you're driving as well. For me, I have RAC Arrival because it is motorhome specific cover. So that's important to me. It covers cars and motorbikes as well, as we know. So I would consider, Mick, what are you driving? And if you need cover for a motorhome that's over 7 metres, then I think RAC Arrival is probably the best product for you on paper.
Okay, we've got Nick Bannister, who has actually recorded something for us.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for your excellent episode on the future of motorhomes, which I've just listened to as regards electric motorhomes. I'm thinking of buying one, a Chasson 640, but it's just made me think really whether this is the right time to buy a diesel Euro 6 version of that vehicle, or should I wait for the Euro 7 version to come out? Also, is it worth waiting for an electric motorhome to be developed and come out? How long will that be? Or do I just go ahead and buy the current diesel version? And how many years use am I going to get out of it? Bearing in mind the more and more restrictions and zones that are going to come in as diesel is phased out, is now the right time to invest in diesel or wait for something better to come along?
Well, Nick, we've listened to your question for many hours. It was a long one. Thanks very much, by the way.
Thank you, Nick.
Next week's podcast is going to answer all your questions, isn't it, Matt?
It is, yeah. We had a visit from Ryan Bowditch, who, Nick, you would have encountered Ryan at the Campervan Camp Out Future of Electric Motorhomes episode, because Ryan was on the panel with me, and Ryan is in charge of Ford Pro, I should say, which is all leisure vehicles from Ford. And Ryan came into the studio just a few days ago, and we recorded a brilliant episode on the future of the electric transit and where Ford is going on this journey to zero emissions. So, Nick, I actually asked Ryan to answer your question, and this is what he had to say.
I mean, first of all, the first question is now a good time to buy a diesel motorhome, and I think the answer to that is yes. Of course, it's absolutely fine to buy a diesel motorhome today. I mean, all of the powertrains are to the latest emissions standards. Of course, the question is what do you want to do with your vehicle, right? How far do you want to go? Where do you want to go with it? And that would probably then drive your decision as to is an electric motorhome appropriate? Is that going to work for what you want to do with it, or are you okay to stay with a diesel? Of course, things change. There's lots of government legislation that's moving around all the time in terms of where you can and can't take your diesel vehicles or diesel motorhomes. But I think it's fair to say that for a significant amount of time, yes, you're going to be able to go away in your diesel vehicle. That's not going to be a problem.
And this is what's prompting Dave's kind of procrastination, if I can call it that, is should I hang on for electric? I mean, that in reality, from Ford's perspective, a transit van that's electric, so the Chasson 640, that's some years away, isn't it?
So e-transit is out there today, and there are various converters working with e-transit to see how the future of electrified motorhomes is going to work. And there's lots of work and lots of understanding and learning to be done there. Again, I think it will be a time before we see a mass market approach to e-motorhomes. Again, leisure vehicles, leisure customers are kind of at the bookend spectrum of what they want to do with their vehicles, right? They're big, heavy vehicles. They want to go on long-distance journeys. And so the technology, the infrastructure has got a way to go before you really get what you want out of an e-motorhome, should I say.
Thank you, Ryan. What a great response. That was a long answer to a long question. Several questions.
Give you your own podcast.
Yeah. Ryan's back with us next week. Really interesting episode coming up. If you're interested in what the future of motorhomes might be, then we get the Ford perspective on it. And it's it's very interesting. Some exciting things coming. Not all electric, interestingly. We discuss alternative zero emission fuels as well, because I think they're going to be part of our future. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, then we've talked death, destruction, long waiting times, money, all sorts of things. Let's finish on a toilet question, shall we?
Back to normal.
Dave has dropped one of their paper forms, one of the shows into us. Thanks for the question, Dave. Do they do extendable porta potties as the pot is quite small? What does he mean extendable?
I guess he means taller.
Height.
Height. Yeah, I'm guessing that's what you mean, Dave. I would say one of the tallest ones I know is the Thetford 565P, as it's a little bit taller than the normal 165.
P for pee and poo?
If you want it to be. I hope that's all you're doing it. So yeah, I would look at the 565P. You can find one at thatleisureshop.com, obviously. But that's one of the tallest ones I know. They are low to the ground, though. It's true. I guess that so they can be put into a cupboard. It may be worth making yourself a little wooden box to put underneath it, making it less of a crouch.
Thank you very much, Matt. Is that a technical term?
That's it. That's the official term.
Less of a crouch. Well, there you go. That's Us done and dusted for this week. Thanks for staying with us right to the end. How do people get in touch with us, Matt?
We would love it if you did. You can go to our website, motorhomematt.co.uk/ask Matt, and there you can record your question. Please tell us where you are. We love knowing where our listeners are in the world. You can record your question there and you'll feature on the podcast, or you can just enter it into the form and press submit. You'll also find us on YouTube as Motorhome Matt, where you'll find a lot more content and some longer extended content as well. So go and check out the YouTube channel, and whilst you're there, make sure you hit subscribe and hit the little bell, and then YouTube can tell you when we release new content.